this Friday evening conversation, the women's strike in Poland as a feminist strategy for change. On behalf of White Plus and the Social Archive Project, I would very much like to welcome you all. People are still joining, but we are starting now. Thank you so much for showing interest and joining us for this conversation on this Friday evening. My name is Silke Steinhilber, and I'm a member of White Plus and will be the moderator in this evening's webinar or session. Before I start introducing the topic and the speakers, there are a few practicalities that I would like to mention that are important for our interaction this evening. We have a time frame of 2 hours for our conversation, and we plan to really have and allow quite some space for interaction with you, our audience, and we're very much looking forward to your questions and an interactive discussion between our panelists, between our speakers, and with you as the audience. If you would like to ask a question or make a comment, preferably you use the chat to announce either your question or to announce the fact that you would like to make a contribution. And you can also use the chat to share important information, introduce yourselves, or any important work that relates to the topic of this evening's conversation. However, we would like to ask you to not post very long texts that are not specific questions, but rather prefer that you post any links that you would like to share with the audience. Please indicate also in the chat if you would like to go live on and ask the question to a panelist. Unfortunately, for everybody who's listening to us via Facebook, it's impossible to ask questions via Facebook. And one last point that is important, very important to us as organizers and panelists over here, we are committed to a very civilized feminist exchange and interaction here. And therefore, we would like to say that we are reserving our right to exclude anyone from the audience who uses offensive or discriminatory language or who abuses this space that we are creating in an undemocratic or anti-feminist way. We are streaming this live, and the webinar is also recorded to be announced or made available afterwards. That means if you would like to remain anonymous when asking a comment or posting a question, we suggest that you rename yourself or post anonymous in your Zoom profile. We are very, very happy to have a group of super interesting panelists and interactors joining us here. And I would like to introduce the speakers and the topic very briefly. We, as the organizers, and I will talk about the organizers in a few moments, we have decided to organize this space to interact with activists from the women's movement in Poland, and to jointly reflect with us and with you as the audience on the women's strike in Poland as a feminist strategy. We see the women's strike in Poland as a powerful example, and we would like to reflect with you, with the panelists and you as the audience, on if and to what extent it can be used as, or what is it that we can learn for women's rights defenders and women's rights activists on other political topics and on the on all other political topics that we're working on. We will look backwards and we will look forward together with you, our panelists, and with you as the audience. We have invited a group of speakers from different localities or political locations, so to speak, in the women's movement in Poland. And I would like to very briefly introduce the speakers now, and then each and every one of them again before they speak. We are starting with a member of the All Poland's Women's Strike Consultative Council, Maria Świetlik. And she's a labor law expert, and the Consultative Council supports the women's strike at the national level. Then we will have an opportunity to engage with Camila Ferenz, who speaks for a national NGO that advocates for sexual and reproductive health and rights. Thirdly, we have Dobry among us, who's a local activist who organizes the women's strike in a small town near Warsaw, and will tell us about what that means to be working in a small town on local women's strike. And our last speaker is Jennifer Ramme, who's an academic activist who will contribute her historical and more contextual perspective to this conversation. And obviously, we are all aware that each and every one of our panelists contributes her own perspective and does not speak for the movement, the strike, the entire situation in Poland. The organizers of this webinar are White Plus and the Social Archive Project. And I would just very briefly like to introduce the two organizing entities. White Plus is a European network of feminist activists, scholars, and women's rights organizations across Europe, largely speaking Europe. It aims to promote women's rights by analyzing the systemic causes of inequality and advocating for transformative change. White Plus comes from a very long-standing collaboration with feminists in the global South and feminist economists. And White Plus is strongly committed to connect the global experiences with feminist activism in Europe. The Social Archive Project Bund Kobiet is an online social community archive, mainly in Polish language, that is documenting feminist and LGBTQI protests and women's strikes. We as organizers would very much like to thank Kinga Lohmann and Jennifer Ramme in making this webinar possible and doing all the important background work of contacting and preparing. I would lastly like to let you know that one of our speakers, Camila Ferenz, can only be with us from 6 to 7 p.m. Therefore, there will be a brief slot right after her contribution for you as the audience to ask any questions that you may have that only Camila can respond to, or any immediate reaction to her contribution. And then we will return to the other speakers and have a larger conversation and interaction, questions and answers after Camila, unfortunately, will have to leave us. All right, so much about the organizing and background information for you. Let's move into the topic of the night, the women's strike in Poland as a feminist strategy for change. I think most of us, all of us probably, wherever we are in the world, have been looking with awe and have been very impressed when we saw the pictures of the huge mobilization of women's rights activists, and not only women, in Poland in recent months and weeks. So I'm really curious and very much looking forward to hearing the perspectives of our speakers tonight, and jointly thinking, what is it that we can learn from your experiences, and tell us more about it. As I said before, we will be starting with Maria Świetlik, who's a political anthropologist and human rights activist and labor law expert. She's a member of a counseling body that's called Counseling Body Supporting the All Women's Strike, All Poland Women's Strike, and of the National Committee of Workers Initiative Union, OZZ. Maria, give us an overview, please, from your experiences, from your point of view, from your participation of where the women's strike is and how has it developed over time and transformed over time. I will hand over to you.
Hello, thank you for inviting me. I would shortly say what happened so far. So we are now like 2.5 months after the annunciation from so-called Constitutional Tribunal of Poland, which is a body, it's a legal institution well known in Europe. But it's important to mention that this particular tribunal is not really legal itself. But anyway, it serves current government for a good purpose to push their conservative agenda whenever they feel like. So at the end of October this year, this constitutional so-called tribunal announced that serious abnormality of fetus is no more a legal reason to pursue an abortion. As you know, Polish abortion law is very, very strict already. And this move was something that the conservative government ruling Poland for more than 5 years already was pushing for. But frankly speaking, and I can say it as also as a person being involved in campaigning for legalizing of abortion for other organizations, no one really believed they will do it, because there is no popular support for this. Like, people are not happy about this so-called compromise as we have it now, and no one really wants to make it even worse. But as we can just speculate, the government has its own agenda. Maybe it was due to the pandemic crisis and their lack of competences to deal with. Maybe they had some other reasons. It's not relevant really, because while the Constitutional Tribunal announced, they met a really immediate response from the organization that was already there, because as I mentioned, it was already 4 years of discussing campaigning for legalizing more broadly abortion in Poland, and conservative government pushing for even less legal exceptions for it. So the response was immediate. It was mainly organized, the protest was mainly organized by the small organization called All Poland Women's Strike. But this small organization has a really huge potential to mobilize people all around Poland and also abroad. And I'm sure my other colleagues will speak more about it, how they were mobilized, how they reach, how do they cooperate. But so for first 10 days, it was actually day after day protest. Some were held in Warsaw, which is a capital city, but mostly it was in towns and small towns of Poland. The statistics says it's more than 60% of towns were somehow involved in the protest. We faced also, which was really amazing, a lot of new people going on this protest, because we already had this protest in 2016 and some later on. But we noticed that there is a new generation coming to protest, and that was making all the difference. So 1 week after annunciation, there were the biggest demonstration in Poland from the counting from the end of communist time. That, as we say, it was probably close to the 1 million people on the streets. which is really, really impressive for Poland. But in the same moment, we felt like there is this dynamic that will probably lead to disencourage of people, partially because the police reaction was super aggressive, partially because we are still under pandemic and the numbers are really, really, really bad in Poland. And this is also like a typical dynamic of a protest. So that was a pretty spontaneous decision that the woman, main activist of a women's strike, decided to organize some expert body that will work on developing more legal proposals based on what we see during the protests as a popular demand. So they invited a group of people and gave them the role to check with the popular opinion of people attending to protests, organizing protests, what are their demands beyond the abortion, because that was obvious one that yes, we want to legalize abortion, but what else? Because this protest shortly became a protest anti-government, but more like anti-establishment for freedom. And as you know, freedom is a very, very, very broad concept. So what does it mean? That was the role for us, and specifically my group is a group working on a labor law. So what could be a solution for this general field that there is a very wrong situation on the Polish so-called labor market, that we are working too much, too hard, we are not underpaid, and our social security system is failing us all the time. So we start to work, and that doesn't mean that protests stopped, but we started to work on more like advocacy mode. And if you will be interested, of course, I will tell you much more about it. But for a moment, the situation is like the protests are not so intense, but by now, but we are sure they will come back, probably in spring, as we are waiting for a second phase of pandemia, a third phase, sorry. And also we already prepared some proposals, and they are under discussion on a website using a tool that maybe you already heard about. It's called Lumio. So it allows people to vote for, against, but also discuss, so we can respond, involve in the discussion with people. What do they think about our proposal? So this is still a consultation / participation moment, and we are planning to make a more like expert type of a report and involve in some advocacy work to engage people from all over this political spectrum to support our demands. So this is the moment we are now on.
A minute remaining.
Thank you so much. How fascinating. So it's really about going beyond abortion. What else? What else? Freedom, democracy, labor and social rights, and the issue around consultation and engagement with a wider audience. However, the starting point, of course, or the point that has kind of brought together women's rights activists in Poland over all these years certainly were sexual and reproductive health and rights questions, and as we learned, the decision of the Constitutional Court on abortion. So this is why it is particularly important and so great to have you here with us, Camila. Camila Ferenz is a lawyer at the Federation of Women and Family Planning in Poland. She has been involved for a long time, among others, for example, in the ongoing women's collective complaint to the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg against the ruling of the Polish Constitutional Tribunal on Abortion that Maria mentioned. So abortion rights and women's sexual and reproductive health and rights have been kind of at the kernel of this ongoing and very long-standing movement in Poland. Camila, based on your broad and specific experience on legal action for women's rights in Poland, give us a little bit of your perspective on the longer term and the situation. If you look at the current political climate in Poland, what action can or should be taken in order to change the legal situation with regard to reproductive rights? What particular changes are necessary? What are the opportunities? And maybe you can also talk about two specific questions in this context. One is there is a discussion on a referendum on abortion. And then also there's this initiative of a collective complaint on women to the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. Are these efficient or effective tools? And how can they interrelate to, how can they be effective in the current situation where there's very limited, let's say, political will to respect the law, and in particular international law? So please, Camila, the floor is yours.
Okay, hello everyone. First of all, thank you for having me. I'm sorry I will need to log out earlier at 7 p.m. according to other appointments. I'm really sorry. And answering your questions, I think what we really need is, first of all, the constant pressure on politicians and on the establishment, pressure made in the streets during demonstrations, during making the campaigns, social campaigns, in smaller and bigger actions. And on the other hand, we need to have more brave politicians to make brave decisions. Of course, they should be considered as normal decisions, which I mean voting for liberalization and decriminalization of abortion. But in fact, right now, this is the only way in the parliament to change the law, in fact. But of course, this goal is, we need to achieve this not only by legal actions, but rather with social actions and with social pressure. But we need to show politicians from right to left that the abortion is a question of access to abortion, broad access and unlimited and without barriers, to free, safe, legal abortion. This access is an issue of right to health, and it also concerns economical problems. The lack of such access to abortion is a source of many inequalities and discrimination. We also need to bring out to the light and make families speak up and show their perspectives, that access to abortion is also the right of the families to decide about themselves. Maybe this is kind of argument that can, create pressure on rather right-wing politicians. Of course, not everyone, because this is kind of, the abortion is not only a case of their personal views, but also about the political agenda and having the tool of control and having to deal with the church and fundamentalists. But somehow we need to create the constantly increasing support for liberalization of abortion law, and putting pressure on politicians to make proper decisions. And it all requires having the social mobilization in streets, but also having educational programs and going outside the bubble and reaching out to people who are exposed to manipulated narration of the church, of the fundamentalist. we need to show that the question, that the issue of access to abortion is a part of bigger picture of the oppression of the state, and the question how far the state can go in playing the role of the ruler and making decision instead of us. It's also connected to our other struggles, like rights of the LGBTQ people, or people, or the rights of migrants, or the rights of the employees in the labor market, and so on and so on. We need to see that the mechanism is very similar. The mechanism of oppression, of depriving us our autonomy and our rights, that all those situations are very, very similar. So I think we need to have all those discussions about this still on, and we need to we cannot let this fire that's burned out to fade away. And yes, we also need to have pressure on stopping the government from promoting fundamentalists who are in fact inside the structure of the government, of the authorities, who get funds to spread their fake news on human rights. And I think once we put to the mainstream debate the perspective that the question of abortion or LGBT people's rights or so on is rather the question who should decide in those matters, whose power or whose view is more important, the politicians in the suits in the parliament, or the judges, or the establishments, or the privileged people, or the citizens or the migrants themselves, because citizenship is not the only category that should be taken into account. And this way I think we can get away from this narration that abortion is controversial, that same-sex couples or marriages are controversial because they are the issue of, I don't know, point of view or morality or something like that. No, morality is private, and the role of the state, it's also all about the role of the state and the obligations, that the tasks of the public administrations, that they are formed not to make our private decisions instead of in our name, but to create the environment to let us make our own decisions and to allow us to enforce and realize those decisions. I think this all is messed up right now in Poland, and we forgot somehow as a society, and somehow normalized the situation where the state goes too far in our lives, and on the other hand neglects their obligations to protect us as the people who live in Poland, to provide us with proper healthcare system, to protect us from inequalities, to give support to unprivileged groups, from example from rural areas. This is the task to do, and then they should not be interested in answering the question if abortion is moral or not. The state's, the authorities' task is to answer the question if everybody has the same access to health services, and if all people have the same ability to to make their decisions about their future, about their family life, about their private life. Going to the question about this this joint complaint to the European Courts of Human Rights, I need to say that this is not the main tool that we are going to use, legal tool. This is only the preparation for the this is only preparing the context for future complaints and for future legal actions. This is the way to show the international arena what is going on in Poland and on a big scale, and to raise their awareness and to catch and sustain their attention, because it's very easy to lose this attention. After a few months, everybody can just, forget what kind of risk is hanging over us, because this announcement of so-called Constitutional Tribunal in Poland can be published anytime and can come into force. Of course, it will be questionable from the legal perspective, but in practice, it will give the freezing effect in hospitals, and in fact, abortion will be barely, of course, this restrictive abortion, the abortion that we had already, and of course, this is one of the most restrictive law in Europe. But even this small version of freedom in abortion will not be accessible in Poland. So the risk is huge, because many women, many people will be forced to go abroad to seek help, medical help, and what is more important, they will need to pay for that. Today, many women need to pay for their own abortions when they have abortion beyond these 3 exceptions in Polish law. They need to pay on their own for abortion pills, and we need to change the situation. Of course, we need to have free abortion in Poland, but instead of us, we can have the people forced to pay for abortion abroad. Yeah, you have some questions?
Yeah, I need to ask you to slowly come to an end so we can have questions. But I just wanted to invite you to very briefly, I'm not sure if the entire audience is informed about the fact that there has been this decision of the Constitutional Tribunal, but then as a consequence of the protests, you said it's looming, so it's not being implemented right now. Maybe you can, in very few words, just for everyone, explain what the situation is like, that it's there, but it's not being implemented, and the 3 exceptions are still, the old law, the old restrictive law is still in place. I think that would help.
Okay, in order to come into force, the judgment of the Constitutional Tribunal, every judgment of Constitutional Tribunal needs to be published. But after announcing this judgment, very controversial to the society, that in fact introduced the ban on abortion in case of fetus impairment, many people just came out to streets and organized huge protests, and it scared the government away, and they decided to wait with publishing the judgment. So in fact, it has never come into force yet. But once it will be published, then all the public hospitals in Poland will stop performing legal abortions in this case of fetus impairment diagnosed. So the publication of the judgment can happen in any time. It all depends on the prime minister. So this is why the constant pressure on the government is important. But in fact, this is a political decision. and it can happen at any time. But I also wanted to come back to the question of the referendum and show my perspective. I'm against the referendum on abortion in Poland. I know that this was the way to win abortion, the liberalization of abortion law in Ireland, but the situation was different. They had ban on abortion written down in the constitution, so they needed to use the referendum as a proceeding to change the constitution and then change the law. And our situation is different. In my opinion, Polish constitutions has no limitations to abortion law, and in fact it's open to having decriminalization and liberalization of abortion law. And preparing referendums on human rights is not a good idea to me, especially that referendum is organized by the politicians. Still, the Law and Justice, the ruling party, the very conservative, I think sometimes very orthodox on fundamentalist party has the majority, and while organizing the referendum and writing the questions, they can manipulate the referendum. And in fact, the results can just bury our efforts that we have taken for years and can just paralyze our fight for liberalization of abortion law in Poland. So I'm against the referendum. I'm now in the committee preparing the draft bill of the liberalization, decriminalization for the Polish parliament. We will start soon gaining the signatures under this draft bill. And I think this is the tool to, first of all, educate the society and to have constant discussions on abortion in Poland. And then the next step will be changing the law. But of course, we need to change the parliament and the ruling government, the ruling party in Poland. But before we do it, we have time to, create the pressure and to change the point of view of many people who still are in favor of the so-called compromise only. And I think the reason for that is being unconscious of the effects of such restrictive law.
Thank you. This has been very illuminating, I think, in many aspects, in terms of the broader aspects on what the fight is about and how individual rights and about sexual and reproductive health and right relates to broader, larger rights and the public and private debate divide and the rights and obligations of the state, as well as your specific responses to the questions on the referendum or on the use of international legal instruments. Given that Camila will inform any need for clarification, anything that you would like to
Sorry, Silke, but I cannot hear any of your speech right now, any word of that you are saying right now. I think there's something wrong with internet.
Step forward. I didn't know anything.
Okay, I think we have a problem, a technical problem. Let us wait maybe that Silke can relog herself so that we can continue the discussion. Silke, are you there? Okay. Maybe we can try again. Or did she freeze?
But there is a question to Camila.
But
on
I didn't
chat.
hear
Maybe
what you
Camila,
just
you
said
could take
about
it.
if there are questions.
Okay, Silke, I don't think we can hear you. Is something wrong with the connection? So maybe we could also ask the audience already to post some questions to Camila before she leaves. There's a question. Before Camila leaves, can she clarify how the committee working on a liberation of abortion that she is on was formed?
Okay, I can answer this question. The committee consists of politicians from the left-wing party present in the parliament, of the activists from the National Women's Strike, and other NGOs fighting for reproductive rights, women's rights, including my organization, which is Federation for Women Family Planning. The committee consists of 15 people because this is the legal condition. And yes, so the politicians and the activists on the other hand. Also, abortion dream team activists are present, are the members of the of this committee. This is the collective that gives the instant help in having abortion in Poland, when it comes to ordering pills, or answering question how the homemade abortion looks like.
Silke, you're again with us. You could take over the moderation.
Yes. In case, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Apologies for the glitch. I have no idea what happened. So anyway, since I missed something, I'm not sure if there were any questions by the other panelists. I saw there's one question coming in now. So and there's another one about the communication between activists and religious and Catholic women, which we'll also turn to in a later part of the conversation, and then there is the question. So I would rather only partially, at least, have Camila answer the question about the communication with religious or Catholic women. But also there's the other question about how likely are legal proposals to help in such an anti-abortion climate. I think partly also Camila already said something about the importance of a broader and not only legalistic response. But maybe Camila, you want to respond still to the other question about on the right on the right to abortion, the communication with Catholic women, and also the limitations of legal approaches.
I would like to start with saying that I think this anti-abortion climate in Poland is kind of it can be a false picture, because it's not like that everybody in Poland is anti-abortion and the majority of society is anti-abortion. Rather, the establishment and the politicians, which are minority comparing to the society, are anti-abortion. In fact, people are becoming more and more supportive of liberalization, and people are becoming more brave to speak up about abortion, because they are starting to realize that this is a part of our everyday life, that this is universal experience. abortion, I mean, and that abortion can be something that they would need in one day, or somebody or their relatives would need. So it's not like that we have only anti-abortion climate right now. The church is trying to show this way, that every family in Poland is against abortion unconditionally, that every decent woman is against abortion. That's not true, because Catholic women, Catholic families, even people who vote for the Law and Justice Party, they sometimes need abortion and they have abortions. I know that because I'm the person who answers the calls from people who need abortion, who need help with enforcement the law, or just want to know how to have abortion. If in many cases, not only those which are in the law, and these are different people from different groups, different social groups, from different communities. Sometimes they are believers and people who go to church, but they know that the decision about having abortion is theirs, and they sometimes need it, and this is the best solution for them. So that's not true that we have completely anti-abortion climate. We just need to show the perspectives of people rather than the establishment of the privileged fundamentalist group. But of course, legal instruments are not the only one and are not the most efficient one. They should be one of the paths that we need to follow. Because I believe that only demonstrations are not effective, only legal tools are not effective. They need to be combined to bring us the success in the future. And the second question about communication with Catholic women, I'm not sure about the understanding of this question, but I need to admit, but this is only my subjective perspective, that this communication is rather poor. We don't have the strong organization like, for example, Catholics for Choice, this international organization. I think it's international, which has the strong and clear position on access to abortion that should be provided without any barriers. In Poland, I think that the latest demonstrations showed that some of Catholics are against such interference of the state in private matters like abortion or deciding how many children you should have. And they supported the demonstrations, they participated in them, but still they are not, I think, yeah, maybe I won't. I would just say that they are not very visible in the public space with the pro-abortion views, if they have such. They rather Catholic people, Catholic women, rather would stay, I think, distance from this discussion and silently support from time to time, rather be openly, rather open, yeah, be openly speak about abortion. I'm not sure if I answered all of the questions, but please verify this.
You now see me twice on the picture. Which is because I'm constantly being kicked out. So I hope this is okay and not too confusing for everyone. Is there still an echo? Can
Yes.
somebody tell me, please?
Yes. You are logged in twice. You have to log out your other account because we can hear you double.
Oh.
I think so.
Okay, sorry. Can you understand me? Or am I being locked out completely now?
We hear you. We hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, I'm back. Sorry again. All right, I'm terribly sorry about the technical glitch. And I missed the last 2 minutes. So in any case, I think we will come back to the question about the communication or the overall environment. And we will get now with our next speaker in particular, we will get a specific kind of perspective on the question of how is the social environment on the ground, so to speak, in a smaller community in a small town, which I would say by international prejudice is always considered as a very Catholic or conservative environment. So I think this is why it's such so interesting and such a pleasure to have Dobry with us. Dobry is an anarcha-feminist activist and will contribute to her perspective. But in any case, before we turn over to the next speaker, I would like to take the opportunity to thank Camila for being with us and for answering our questions. And we hopefully will be able to engage with you in the future. Camila, thank you so much for joining us and for responding to the questions. And yeah, and for joining us on this Friday evening. Thank you. So so now I will turn to Dobry. As I said before, she's an anarcha-feminist activist who is involved in organizing women's strike activities in a small town near Warsaw. And in particular, she's engaged in a relatively newer movement in Poland of apostasy, of stepping out of separation from the Catholic Church, and in the support of LGBTQI groups. So Dobry, thanks for joining us tonight. And
thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
I would like to ask you, how does this play out? How in a smaller town, how do you persuade people to participate? Or maybe you don't even need to persuade them. Maybe they're there. But what does it mean for young people, for people who are not like the usual Warsaw crowd, so to speak? And in a second step, thinking about the environment at the moment, we all are or have become aware of the increasing politically motivated violence. So how does this play out, and how does this affect mobilization and activities in a smaller town in Poland? Please tell us about your experience.
Okay, thanks for being here. So as far as the strikes are concerned, so it wasn't that difficult to organize, mobilize people. I live in a really small town which counts like 20,000 inhabitants, and I don't remember that much gathering of people for a political cause, yeah, like women's rights and even the LGBT agenda, because at the beginning of a strike, we put it very clear. I put it very clear that this demo is for the right of choice, but also for supporting LGBTQ community, which is which is large in our city, although they don't want to show off that much because they're usually young people, like teenagers. But I think this statement at the beginning was very crucial, very important for them to hear that they are also they're also very important for us as a part of our community. So as far as the numbers are concerned, it was like about 1,000 people, but in my small town. But later, all around my town, another town, were picking up the idea and organizing themselves. Yeah, it wasn't me. Okay, I was there because I wanted to be there, and all the posters and slogans were very radical. Really, I haven't seen that for many years. That people were women, but also men, and were really pissed off with what's going on the political level, and they want to show, and also with the church involvement in the social in life, in our lives and our private lives. Because for me, I think it needs emphasis that it's not only the politics, it's also about the church, which is so very closely related, because it's known that church church have a lot of say in politics, because they, for example, before the elections, they promote some politicians from the in the churches, and it's like the politicians were in debt of priests, so they are so too closely related. In a small town, well, the people are still going to the church, but I think there's this growing number of young people who are looking for more laic, not like ethics, yeah, to hold on in life. So it was also a good opportunity for them to talk about the possibility of leaving the church and setting up some groups supporting each other. And I think it's not that difficult right now, because there are many cases of priest pedophiles emerging, and it's really like on the reaching out to people, and people, well, cannot tolerate such behavior, and that such priests are moved from one church to other. They are not punished, they are not held responsible for the act. So I think it all adds up to this this environment of protest as well. So a part of my town, there were like 4 or 5 surrounding towns also organizing different sorts of protests, and as I was talking to the people on the demos, they were like they were thinking, they were saying that they need such they would need a place for debating such vital issues in afterwards, not only during demos, but but afterwards, to meet and to have such debates on human rights, LGBTQ&A rights, women's rights, and so on. So I think we'll keep up this after this protest. This will stay with us for sure.
Would you like to tell us a little bit or to respond to the question about the political violence and repression, which is something that we sometimes hear about, that's very, or it has become very tense in the Polish public sphere?
Yes, I've experienced this, not in my town, but in Warsaw, because I also were a frequent protester in Warsaw. So there were acts of violence from the police. They were like surrounding people, making pressure, being very aggressive, using really even illegal tools like steel this bats or something. Gas, of course, tear gas. So it is all kind of like first aid tips. You have to go for a demo, like have this special water for rinsing your eyes, helmet or goggles, skiing goggles. So I think the demos in November were really radical, and but despite this, we were on the streets. Policemen were very strict whenever they saw like a group of people going to the demo. They were stopping them and writing down their personal data. But there's also a basic knowledge that you refuse to accept the ticket from the policeman, so they have to pass it to the court. And right now, the politicians, in view of this whole movement of people refusing to accept tickets from the police, they are planning to change the law that a citizen can't refuse can refuse a ticket from the police. So they are making the law. They are trying to make the law stricter, and it's really getting very abusive. So so there are also so there are massive arrests of protesters. They were, for example, arrested in Warsaw, but to make the situation harder, the protesters were taken to police stations in small towns. So then when we found out that, for example, somebody is near my town or in Grodzisk, which is also close to my town, so we were going there to organize solidarity demos near the police station. So as I said, there is a whole network of support and solidarity being created, and that's very encouraging and very, like good in this dreadful situation.
I wanted to invite you to link to, since we will give the floor again later on to Maria, I wanted to invite you, Dobry, to link to something Maria said earlier on about their efforts to capture people's concerns and to reflect like broader social rights issues and broader concerns of with respect to women's social rights in particular. And I'm wondering to what extent this is these questions and these debates are reaching smaller towns as well, because obviously it would be very important that such a larger debate about which rights or where's the movement going to go and what are the demands is also taking place in smaller towns. Do you see that happening? Do you see this broadening of movement and beyond demonstrations, so to speak, also happening in your town or in smaller towns in general?
Yeah, I can see that, because women are asking, what else can we do afterwards? Yeah, after we go home. So spreading the word that there are these consultancy councils merging, and that the website Marysia mentioned is available for them, for all of them, so they can reach it and participate. So right now it's like moving from the streets to the web.
In very practical terms, how do they know? Because this is something you need to spread the information. You need to spread this ability. I mean, in many countries, even or I imagine maybe not outside Poland, but in further away areas, maybe there is not such great internet connection. Or how do people know about this consultative website if they are not part of the group anyway?
Well, we spread it through social media. It's obvious. I've also heard it on the news, on radio, that there are some talkers invited from Women's Strike, from the leaders of Women's Strike, and they are mentioning it. So I think it can reach really everybody.
Maria, maybe this is the moment to bring you into the conversation again, because this is Dobry has already started to build on the bridge that we created about the consultative process that is going on in the social council. Maybe from your experience and point of view, you can talk a little bit more about the opportunities, but maybe also the difficulties in building alliances across groups, in drawing a large audience, how easy it is, and or where do you experience difficulties? How is the alliance building process going on?
Thanks. So yes, my point of view will be also, of course, very specific, as labor issues are very specific, and let's be honest, there is not that much people interested in. I mean, in practical, yes, but in theory, this is a very complicated legal system, and myself, I'm still learning. By education, I'm an anthropologist, but I am a union activist, so this is the way that I learn how important is it. And as a union, we're also not typical labor union, we're an anarcho-syndicalist one. So a feminist approach is something that is really rooted in our everyday practices. That's why we had some internal discussion in the union, not the first one, because the abortion issue is coming back from time to time. So we have already like a ready grant to discuss more than this. So, but maybe to add a little bit to what other speakers already said, that is true that Poland is a Catholic state, but it doesn't mean it's a Catholic country. And what I want to say is, it's true that more than 90% here in Poland are born as Catholics and they get baptized. But first, they are Catholics not by choice, not only that because they are baptized as infants, but also that Catholic is very specific kind of a Christianity, and actually like only one very popular in Poland. So there are other groups who, as you probably know, they have also much more open approach to sexual educations, controlling women's body and so on. But if you are born in Poland, you will probably be baptized, but and you will probably take a basic education at school, which is because we have religious education at school, and by this I mean like generally Catholic ideology pushed. also against abortion. But what is really interesting that a lot of people are like developed immunity on this propaganda. This is why we have this new generation of people who were born in the last 20 years who took all this education, but still they are resistant to this ideology. And what I'm trying to say is like, this is sometimes labels are misleading, you know. So like, you know, women are women. Like we have this experience of our life, of what's happening to our friends, our daughters. We are concerned about it. So this is a platform that we can meet across the political differences we are sharing. And this is a really important important thing, because like, obviously we're like dealing not only with one governing party, right? We are dealing with a general global problem of conservative propaganda being pushed hardly. Like we see the same in US, but in South America and everywhere in Russia, obviously, and some other countries in Europe as well. So we need to learn how to speak with people, like putting for a moment aside or away differences and focusing on one issue. And this approach is, I guess, working well. And I watch also people, women from a small organization from small villages of Poland that were supporting abortion protests. So like there is, because they are women, like they have the everyday experience. What does it mean to be a woman in Poland? It means like constant oppression, constant problem, like a fight to keep your life in dignity. And they also suffer a lot from Catholic priests who are ruling, like trying to control their bodies, their everyday life. There is a big problem of violence, like domestic violence in Poland, that is also an issue when Catholic Church is trying to tell women, please treat it as your cross to handle, like don't rebel, be nice. So for that reason, this is really a place that we can meet as a woman. Sometimes, you know, it's even harder to meet with women from a middle class, like for me personally, than from people from small towns or villages, because sometimes the class difference is more than matters. Like yeah, so this is the issue of labor, which I'm working on, is for me like a good point, good perspective to understand what is happening. Like people are really changing in Poland, partially because we all watch Netflix, and this is like a new norm for us. And this is really interesting. Like, what does Americanization of culture means for Polish people? We have aspiration going beyond, much beyond the experience of our parents' generation, and and we see our daughters as well. I have 2 teenage daughters, and they are so much more open with demanding more from life. They want, like, this is one of the slogan of protests. We want all the life. We don't want just one thing to have. Yeah? And for that reason, the issues like labor law is super important. And what we are trying to do here as a consulting body in this group is to show that experience of labor for women, it's not just an issue like only in the company you are going for 8 hours. This impacts all your life. And we are also trying to show that we do much more unpaid work than only something that we are doing for our employers. So, and what was really a nice surprise for me, that we have a very good outcome from this consultation. So like we see that something that could look like a radical proposal is really welcomed. So for that reason, I'm super happy, because we are a little bit like decoding what people want, what they mean. And in Poland, generally the language of class or Marxist or leftist is completely rigid, and so we're like decoding demands that are sometimes expressed in the liberal language or even conservative one, or like a lot of identity language is on a place, but we're trying to decode. Does it mean, do you want to work more, or does it mean, do you want to work less? Would you like to be paid for your work that you're doing at home, like all the care work? And I see that people are much more progressive than not only government, but generally the political establishment. So, and for that reason, I'm pretty optimistic that this protest that started from the abortion will bring much broader change, that people will more openly demand what they really need to change in their life.
I think this is extremely interesting, what you're just talking about this perception of whoever has this perception, the policymakers, the government, about where society is versus the reality that you see in on this platform and in this consultation process. It seems to me that this is a good moment to bring Jennifer into the conversation and to look maybe also beyond Poland, because it may also be sometimes that we, whoever the we on the outside is, have a quite restrictive or restricted perspective on Poland. So this is why these conversations are so important. So Jennifer, please join the conversation. I would like to briefly introduce Jennifer. She's a researcher on feminist movements and the far-right sexual politics at the European University Viadrina and the Collegium Polonicum in Frankfurt oder Słubice, in between Germany and Poland, so to speak, and is also engaged in this in the social archive project Bund Kobiet, one of the two co-organizing organizations of this webinar, and is engaged in documenting protests and interviewing activists for many years. So Jennifer is also White Plus members, by the way, and a feminist activist. So Jennifer, from your work and your experience and your position, come join the conversation. What are the transnational dimensions of these protests, and what can we as outsiders, again, whoever the we is, can learn from what is going on, this fascinating mobilization, but also a much broader conversation in Poland? What is it that we can learn, and what does it mean maybe also for feminism in Europe? That's a very broad question, which I'm sure you will refuse to generally answer, but let's broaden the perspective. Please, Jennifer.
Mm-hmm. It's really a broad question, but I think we are an international audience here, so probably it's also a good start for a discussion where we can all get engaged. I mean, there are several dimensions of this transnational dimension. One is that the protests are not just taking place in Poland, but it's a process because there's such a huge Polish community outside of Poland. So it was a massive event also like all around the world. And this is like one dimension, that the protest did not take place there. Just we had also like border crossing protests in Słubice, like, you know, so there's a lot of happening, and it's because, yeah. And then we have the other dimension that the feminist movement, of course, is also transnational, and that there are a lot of influences and connections between the movements. And we have similar mobilizations in Latin America. I think we have Edme among us who could also say something about this. And those movements in Poland and in other places in the world are kind of facing similar problems related to this authoritarian or right-wing or neoconservative backlash. And so they're connected with each other. So this is like one transnational dimension. And the other transnational dimension I already mentioned is, of course, the far right, which is organized transnationally. So there's kind of also a need of this more transnational response. And so this is one dimension. And another is also that we have, which you maybe have to think about, is this kind of geopolitical situation we are in, and also that we are having like institutions like the European Union or the United Nations. And despite there's a lot of critique of those institutions, still like we can see it also in many post-Soviet countries where people face like similar problems with the right-wing backlash. These institutions are still like a very important point of reference, like the human rights framework. So this is maybe also one thing we have to think about, that is important also to keep it in mind, that there are also efforts to kind of change those infrastructures, those environments. And so there's also a struggle going on in this dimension. And yeah, this is maybe very briefly, very broad, what I said, the points. And when it comes to the protests in Poland, maybe, and this will be a little bit a different thing, I wanna point to what we could learn from the protest. I think it's interesting that, I mean, we're having this right-wing backlash and there are a lot of similarities, but then again, Poland is a very also specific situation that, like I would say the transformation of the state into a more authoritarian state has been very much put forward, and the climate is a very antagonistic political climate. So this was also part of the success of the women's strike, is that it was uniting like people in this very antagonistic climate and kind of creating a unity also in this very dramatic situation. So I think it's very good and important that now the movement moved on from just a position of defense, what it was before in 2016, where you had like people who had very different opinions, from legalization of abortion, like abortion free on demand, and people who are for the compromise. So they moved on, now to another. You can see like the movement developed super rapidly from a position that was, you had all kind of positions, to like a very much supporting like liberalization of abortion. So I think what we can see, how fast like there can happen a mental change among like populations. And also what we can see, and I think it was very important, and this is, I think, one of the largest successes of the movement, is that they were able to mobilize people who haven't been politically active before, and like open the space for debate of people who are not experts in topic, and like linking the dimension of politics with personal issues. And maybe this also links a little bit the topic to what Camila said before, about like the question of, for example, Catholics, if Catholics are supporting this, or what are the possibilities of building alliances, is that this like social diversity is there, and so it's like reflecting people's life, that there are different family practices, there are different like sexual practices. The practice of the people looks different than the far right projects that are going on, and it affects everybody. It affects like LGBTQ people, but it also affects heterosexual people who want to have the right to divorce. So there is this, because these gender regimes like affect actually all of us. So it's not just a question of women. And this is, I think, something that became very obvious, and it's a great possibility also to politicize people. And I think this is what happened in Poland. And I think it's super important that the movement mobilized people in the rural areas, in the small towns. Mm-hmm.
I wanted to turn back one of the things that Jennifer said to Dobry and Maria as a question. Jennifer was referring to what is going on elsewhere, for example, in Latin America, as in similar debates or on similar issues. Is that important? Do you perceive struggles that are going on elsewhere internationally as relevant for your debates and your activism in Poland? Dobry, maybe you want to go first and then Maria can come second.
Okay. For me, it's a great sign of solidarity, and of course, for me, it matters a lot that the other communities all around the world are showing their support. And well, it's very encouraging, and that we face, that we have the same challenges. Yeah. So this is discouraging that we still face the same challenges, but we can somehow we have to keep on fighting for that. And thanks for all the signs of solidarity, all the actions, protests all around.
Maria, would you like to add?
Yeah, I totally support what Dobry said. This is really important for people to see that they are not alone, that they are heard internationally, and each sign of support is here really, really welcomed. And because this is a lot about identity and dignity, and especially young people, they want to see themselves as Europeans, or more even like citizens of the world. And I think, like being honest, probably the South America protests are not that important that US protests and all the situation that developed during the Trump presidency that was here also watched carefully. And all the symbolism, this beautiful parts, this kind of, because every protest needs its symbols to propagate. So of course we have our own, but I see a lot of inspirations coming from abroad. And yes, and also I would like to mention that Klementyna Suchanow, which is one of the leader of the women's strike, she wrote a very important book. I checked meanwhile, unfortunately, I don't think it was translated into English, but I hope it will. So she is, by education, she's a PhD. She has a PhD from Latin and Polish literature influence. So she speaks perfectly Spanish, and she spent a lot of time in Argentina and in other countries. She built a strong connections with the feminists from there. And this way, so of course, she's engaging them and also engaging Polish women to support their fight. But what she did in her last book, she did a really strong journalist investigation on neoconservative organizations pushing their own agenda. I link on Facebook to the article in English about it, so please read. But she definitely are building this conscience in Poland that we are not alone, and this is a broader issue. So we are fighting here for our rights, but we also understand that this is a general war on women happening right now. And okay, I will try to say it link here, but I'm on the phone. I will do the effort in a moment. I'm responding to the chat question. And so what she's trying to show that this is just like abortion ban is just a first step. And I think it's really shaping the imagination of people here, that they understand that if we don't succeed here with the abortion, there is much more in stake. So she mentioned, for example, right to divorce, something that like for us sounds like so obvious, but on the other hand, we know that no rights are given for good. Like we need to fight for them all the time. And this is not a perspective of Clementina. This is my own. Like for me, it's an even broader issue. This is a fight against capitalism and generally the plutocracy pushing people into the fights for their basic freedoms just to make their own profits in a quiet, in a shadow. And I think like looking for looking for this other issue that are emerging here, as we mentioned already, it's not just about abortion. People are also in Poland becoming more and more aware of the other issues, like being more, I wouldn't say anti-capitalist because it's too much to say, but definitely anti-neoliberal. And this is general issue. This is not a typical Polish problem.
I'm really curious about your perspective on the role of the European Union and EU movements or EU citizens to some extent as well, because how do you perceive, how strong, like how do you perceive, is for you in the movement that is going on in your fight, is the European Union a positive point of reference? Is do you think the European Union should take a stronger stance on Poland? You said Polish young generation considers themselves as Europeans or as global citizens even. Do they have a rather hopeful perspective on the European Union, which in many other countries has been criticized as not taking a strong stance on these anti-democratic steps in Poland, and not a strong enough stance as opposed to the Polish government? So, what is your take on what do you have hopes toward the European Union as an actor in your fight? Mm-hmm. And maybe this is also something Jennifer could come in, but. Yeah, Dobry, why don't you go first, and then Maria?
As far as I know, so the things are happening with the European Union. There are like petitions and actions brought, and but the process is not that fast. Yes, so we have to wait for the results of well, the path is not so quick. So I hope the European community knows about our issues, and well, they will come with some help, some pressure on our government.
Maria, are you hopeful?
Yeah. So yeah, like so it's like speaking about the European Union. It's really complicated to say because there are different bodies. So we totally see a support from the European Parliament, but it doesn't really change a law, right? So we would need to see some change in the European Commission, and for a long time, as we know, European Commission is trying to focus on the economic issues and not to involve in so-called cultural problems. But of course, they are totally intertwined. So it's really like strange that we could say this is just a cultural issue. No, definitely not. It's a matter of life, no less than economic issues. But I would say that probably the general knowledge about European union institutions and the legal possibilities are not super broad or important. When I mentioned the European citizenship, I would rather refer to the general identity. And I would say what plays a role, we don't like to, as probably no one, we don't like to be the poorest, worst student in the class. And so when I see that for example, like information that Poland has the most strict abortion law in Poland, it plays the role. Like it's as I mentioned, it's a matter of dignity. No one wants to be the worst one, and we have a lot of other reasons to feel that the Poland is not doing really well in the different statistics. So yes, I think this is something that the organizers are playing on, and it works. But legally speaking, there are some approaches. I think Camila mentioned it, but I wouldn't say that this will change a lot, especially that the government we need to deal with is already showing us that they don't care that much about the European regulations. They breached many ways. In maybe you remember, for example, the cutting of primeval forest of Białowieża was a really big issue, and they stopped only when there was a really high financial sanction. But this is a several years legal road to this. And I wouldn't expect that on issue of abortion that it's possible, because but on the other hand, as I see saying all the bad things about the European Union, I believe that this institution also is about to change, and there are new people coming to the parliament, and slowly I hope that the status of human rights, including women rights, will be much higher then, and we will and this is something I would guess people are seeking in Poland.
I would like to, before giving the floor to Jennifer for her reflection, to invite other participants to come up with questions or raise your voice, so to speak, in the chat in case you would like to ask a question. The floor is certainly open, and we're certainly interested to hear from you if you have any questions. But Jennifer, I wanted to give the floor to you again, and I wanted to add another question to something that you said before about the how a few years ago there was so much internal divide. And now there's more unity behind the idea, or behind the concept of, or the demand for liberalization. I'm wondering, is it because the right or the far right is so extreme and has distanced itself so far from what regular polls, or the ones we are interacting with in this panel at least, perceive as normal life and family practices? Is it because the far right is so extreme and the government is taking such extreme positions that now on the other side there's greater unity? And will the unity last? Or is it for some other reasons? Jennifer, please.
I think there are several reasons. For one reason is for sure that those proposals are so extreme that even the people who are conservative are kind of rallying against it. So this kind of made the base that those people stand in opposition. But what the protest also started, and this is what I was referring to, is this politicization of people like in their everyday life. So it opened up this political space that people who are not active politically, and this is also what we saw in research, that in those small towns, like 70% of the people who are organizing the strikes haven't been active politically at all. And now in this protest in 2020, we can see there's an increase even of those people politicized on those issues who haven't been active before. And all those people are like opening up spaces where they discuss politically about such issues like abortion, and they're linking it to their personal experience. And through that, they see like they they come to conclusions which kind of solutions are better, and it leads them to see that actually their life is not like the far right projects would like to have them. There's a lot of talk that, I don't know, gender or LGBT, that it's all social engineering. This is like the critique and this like discourse of the far right. But people, when they kind of exchange their information and discuss like their everyday experience with abortion, you know, all those kind of issues they experience, and they also can relate it to the people they know, then they politicize this way. And now we can see, I found it very interesting that you can also see, you could see this in those small towns, that you could see the working class man had joined the protest, like a lot of new social groups which you haven't seen before. And I think this is the big value of the protest. And this platform Lumia is like one thing, you having now the experts. So I wonder, I mean, I'm not sure, I'm not part of the OSKs, I don't know, but I'm very interested what will happen further with this politicization, because I think it's very valuable that you also have this, like, you know, on the ground, those discussions, and that people kind of really see they can do a change. Many people were saying it reminds them of the Solidarność movement, this kind of very ground revolution. And I think this is also maybe something that can lead to a broader change. If we think about that states are like processes. I mean, you're having the state and this is the government, but the state is also done by people who perform actions. And this is what you can see. So now in the strike, you have, for example, this huge support organized by people from different occupations. You have 130 lawyers organizing help infrastructure for people who are arrested in the protests. So all the people like from different professions who are occupied with something else are contributing to the protest. And I think this is also important. I'm not sure if I answered. I think something happened.
Because I couldn't read it because, yes, you did answer. There was a longer question about class difference in the chat, which I didn't get to read yet. But I was wondering and wanted to take further this, what you just said, Jennifer, to Dobry. Do you see this really on a local level in smaller towns, this politicization? One question. And then in general, I'm really curious about, in your contribution now, it sounded that there's a lot of unity between women as a political identity, but maybe also heterosexual women as a identity in terms of sexual orientation. So unity between women as a heterosexual women and LGBTIQ movement. Is it in fact that there is such unity? And how is like the general population recognizing sexual orientation and sexual identity in these broader struggles that are going on?
So referring to your first question, I think that people get more political. For example, I've noticed that we are organizing also in small groups because there are big pro-life campaigns that are putting very, very expensive posters around the town that it's so bad to kill babies by mothers, but it's very, very, very expensive campaign, and people are getting really mad at this because so many money is spent by the right fundamentalists, and we are just organizing, you know, small actions, direct actions, like making aware people that you have a choice, that it's about your human rights, and it shouldn't be, you know, decided by fundamentalists. again? What was the second question? Was it to me or someone else?
The second question was about this perceived unity, or the unity that I perceived in the contributions here, at least, between LGBTIQ and women in the sense of cis women as a heterosexual identity. Is there a unity? Is that considered anathema? Is it a problem or not?
I think it's a sensitive question because in terms that LGBT movement has to speak for themselves. Yes, the people have to, and this is the moment that I see it for the first time, that during the pro-abortion demonstrations, these people are also taking stand and saying not just about women, but about people with uterus. So this is a very major change for me over the years. And I would like to see the unity. And I can see it. Well, I can see some points of unity, but I think it's not, it's inviting, or it's including the LGBT movement to this debate going on. So we have to there are just part of this debate, so we shouldn't exclude them.
Maria, would you like to add?
So what can I say? Like, my observation is since the last 6 years that because this is just the time I'm really involved in the campaigning on different issues, so this is my own perspective. So in 2014, there was not even one person thinking to bring a rainbow flag on a protest that is not specifically on LGBTQ rights. In 2016, which started this abortion abortion protest, there were people coming with a rainbow flag, and it was widely discussed. After all, there was a lot of small organization of pretty young people bringing on the LGBT identity problems to the public debate. It was partially because this is just a new generation with completely different horizons than the old one, but partially because there is a big problem in Poland. We didn't mention it a lot, but not only there is a war on women, there is a war on LGBT in Poland, and this is a severe problem that probably should be discussed more widely. But just to mention, we are witnessing a lot of psychiatrist mental health problems among really young children. Like last year, a 12-year-old girl committed suicide because she was bullied so much at school because she was considered gay. Like, this is the level of a problem in Poland. So, but going back to this interaction, so I was also organizing a protest for general democratic issues, and then it was all the protests. Every time it was just ritual discussion: should people with rainbow flag coming and showing off? Should we only accept Polish and European Union flag? And this time there was maybe one person who said something on media, and that's it. It was approved. It was like it became totally normalized. And of course, you will always find people who have a problem. But just to show you this dynamic, it took 4 years to change the perspective of people, and there is no big discussion. It's widely understood that there is this is the same war, and I cannot be more happy about it. I'm really even trembling a little bit speaking about it. because it's a big win. Of course, there is still a lot of issues, like it doesn't mean the problems are solved, but we made as a Polish general community, we made a big step forward.
This is extremely interesting. Thank you so much. There are two questions in the chat that I saw. One, I don't know if you have had a chance to read them. One is a question about class as a barrier, or how you were able to overcome class barriers. And the other one was about if there were changes on in the daily life at the local level that people experience or have experienced. And I would like to ask you to be relatively short, because we're slowly coming to an end in this meeting. So, but please,
So if
class as a barrier, and a question on the local level, maybe that's more for Dobry, and the class question more for Maria.
So
Maria,
maybe I will share.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, okay. I will shortly say, so as a union, of course, we are gathering people from different classes. A lot of them, they are from the people working in production, logistics, like physical workers. And I was really super happy to see my comrades, women from production lines, who were strongly supporting the protest. And this is absolutely clear for them that the abortion law in Poland is a shame, and it should be much broader. They want to have an access. They understand it's a financial problem as well. In this sense, it's a class issue as well, because of course, people women who don't have money, women who don't speak a foreign languages, women who cannot travel easily abroad because of the cultural distance, they suffer the most, and this is absolutely clear for them. But saying all of this, I would say, for different complicated reasons, this is still mainly middle class revolt. And maybe it has to be like this. I would dream to make it more approachable for people from different classes, but also the leaders of the women's strike, they are pretty specific, like those are really well-educated women working in like being a part of a specific higher middle class group. So this is their horizons. But saying this, I just want to say I'm totally appreciating everything they are doing, but it won't be a class revolution for sure, because this is not a scope of their interest or goals or whatever. So we are like trying to preserve the interests of the class groups in our working group on labor, because this is obviously the level that is very important. But I wouldn't say that we are facing such a huge revolution as in the LGBT subject, as I mentioned before. Thank you.
Very interesting, I think. Thank you, Maria. And Dobry, the question about changes in daily life for people on the local level, how have these huge mobilizations, how has it affected people's daily life?
Well, I hope that they will feel motivated to, for example, to do some small steps as regards, for example, not sending their children to religion classes at school. Really small steps, but in big scale, they make really a difference. Yeah, for example, also going with the declarations of apostasy into the churches. I'm aware that there are many groups on social media that are established and people really support each other. For example, they made a map of Poland, how easy or how difficult is to make this apostasy declaration in the parish. And I think also that we have to do something, that this pedophilia of priests is very, very strong issue. And I found one of the foundations has done also a map of priest pedophilia, and I think it should be some follow-up actions should be done, like for example going to the local, to the towns, villages, and really supporting people there. So this for me, I think this is the next step we should do with all the facts we have in hand, yeah, about the church abuses. And well, maybe all these small steps will finally end up with separation of the state and the church, which I'm a great supporter, and I hope for that. Thanks. And I saw also a question on the chat about 8th of March, so I think, yeah, we'll have a big demo. So.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to come back to that question as well. Maybe as a kind of a closing question, what is planned? So certainly there are plans in Poland for the 8th of March. Is there anything else you would like to highlight on that topic? There's a proposal, I think. What does it say? It would be great if we could have major ones all around the world. That's what Özlem says in the chat regarding the 8th of March. Certainly, yes. Let's see where we stand with respect to the pandemic, and certainly the situation in terms of public mobilization is really different in different countries. It's really, I think we are drawing to an end, but what I most appreciate personally, and I'm hearing another comment see comments on the chat, this, the kind of the positive, the optimistic note that you were able to carry into this conversation. And I would like to thank Jennifer, Maria, and Dobry, and Camila, who's no longer with us for this. I think it's been very encouraging and very stimulating to hear you talk about how the Polish women's movement, or the movements that are going on, are able to join have been able to join different topics and broaden, starting from the issue, the yet unsolved issue of sexual and reproductive health and right and access to abortion, to raising really much broader questions about the role of the state and the relationship between the individual, the family, and the state. So, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to say any last words that you feel, or anything that you would still like to raise. Maybe we should start with Jennifer. First, is there anything you would like to close with? Anything that you feel hasn't been emphasized enough?
Yeah, I just want to say, I think what we can learn from this Poland, also from the situation in Poland, that how fast change can happen, that it's just rapidly super fast. And then also the mental change of people can happen really like within months. And this is incredible that there are those moments. That's why the protests were also called the revolution. I think not just because the protests were massive, but also because of this, changes. So I think this is important to keep it, and maybe also that we are open to leave a space and let people in and participate in the debate, which are maybe not already sharing all our views, but really being open for the discussion, because like change can only happen collectively, and you really need to engage. It's like a collective process. It's not just based on leaders. So I really would emphasize this part. And this makes me really hopeful with the strike and what was happening in Poland, because of course, like the repression of the state, this is like another issue. Let's see what happens.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for being with us. But still, is there anything you would like to highlight, to emphasize that you feel like should not get lost and stick with us participants after this conversation tonight?
Definitely, I would support what Jennifer just said. Like, don't let yourself, your internal or external critic, discourage you. If it's possible in Poland, one of the most conservative country in Europe, it's possible everywhere. Just make each time make a little step, and the change will come, and probably will be the most surprised by it. Thank you very much. It was really interesting talk to me as well.
Dobry, before we let you go back to outside Warsaw, your town, thank you for being with us. And is there anything you feel should stick with us participants from tonight?
I'd just like to say a big thank you for your solidarity, for showing us your solidarity for Polish women and LGBT movement. And well, we'll keep up the fight. I hope that you'll support us, and we'll having such debate in the future as well. maybe it's the matter of several months that we can meet again and talk on a totally different level, because it's really rapid. It's really changing fast.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
On behalf of White Plus, I also wanted to thank you all, the panelists, the participants, those who listened and shared their spirit, those who participated in the chat. I wanted also to highlight that we are, as White Plus, there are plans already to broaden this conversation and do a webinar in the near future where we bring together activists from Latin America, possibly, maybe also from elsewhere, and European or Polish activists to broaden this conversation. So we are definitely following this thread that you have laid out for us tonight. Thank you so much for this upbeat sharing of your knowledge, your insights, your experiences. We really hope you will stay in this broader conversation with us. Thanks to all the participants who were in the Zoom call. It's odd not to be able to see you, but at the same time, it's very nice that despite the pandemic and despite the situations we are all in, we have this space where we can join and have a political conversation, learn from each other, and motivate us to continue the struggles we're in and broaden the struggles. Thank you so much. Have a very good Friday evening. Have a nice weekend. And we as White Plus, and thanks again also to Bund Kobiet for co-organizing this. We as White Plus, we look forward to you joining our conversations again in the future. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.